Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Leslie Elistad, and I'm very happy to welcome you here to the program this evening. I am a member of the Wellness Through Mindfulness Committee and also one of the regular speakers for Wellness Through Mindfulness. If you haven't been to our events before, I should explain that we are a local Calgary group that is dedicated to bringing the teachings of mindfulness and other related topics to Calgary. If you've attended one of our events before, welcome back. You can find more information about us on the Wellness Through Mindfulness website, WTM, thebreathproject.org. We are very pleased to be working with the Calgary Public Library to present these events. We started about 5 years ago at the Shaganappi Community Centre to do these presentations with a variety of local Calgary speakers and teachers. And then when the pandemic arrived, we made a partnership with the Calgary Public Library so we could continue to provide mindfulness support to Calgarians through the pandemic. So I wanted to let you know what's coming after this evening to whet your appetite. On Thursday, December 16th, Dr. Anne Mahoney will be presenting, and she'll be talking about a further exploration of how to skillfully be with the situation we're in with this pandemic, and she'll be using what's called the Four Noble Truths as a format that we can refer to when we're meeting challenges. And following that, on Thursday, January 6th, Christine Francoeur will be talking about awakening mindfulness in daily life. And she's going to emphasize how mindfulness is applied in our daily living, and particularly the qualities of patience, kindness, focus, and choice. And emphasizing that although life is uncertain, we can be more skillful in those moments that really matter with the support of our mindfulness practice. So as a reminder, our events are the first and third Thursdays of every month from 7 till 8:30. And as you know, because you registered for this one, you can register through the Calgary Public Library website by searching the word mindfulness. And then on to tonight's speaker is Dr. Allan Donsky, and he is one of our regular speakers, so you may have met him before. He is going to talk, as Maya said, about how to rest in every moment, a mindful way to the harmony of silence. And as you may know, Allan is a trained pediatrician who then specialized in child and adolescent psychiatry and has practiced that for 26 years. He's also a clinical associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Calgary. He regularly offers presentations and facilitates workshops at schools, universities, conferences, and in the business world. And Allan has a very curious mind. He's exploring in all kinds of avenues, including mythology and his own personal writing projects. So he's a very interesting and fascinating speaker. You will enjoy his use of language. He uses peace, beauty, and joy as guides to improve the quality of our being while we are doing our doing. And as Maya mentioned, you will be able to ask questions both in the chat and as a participant. So I'm just thinking it might be useful to use the raise hand function if you want to actually speak with Allan. So keep that in mind. That is under reactions. If you aren't familiar with that, that's at the bottom. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Allan and enjoy his meditation, guided meditation, and talk.
Thank you very much, my friend Leslie. It's a pleasure to be here again. And I certainly enjoy the opportunity to share what I have found to be useful and hope to be able to present that tonight, first in the form of a sit that will be hopefully focused on this resting and some harmony and some silence. Before we do that, I want to just say something about harmony. And I like the symbol of the yin yang at the bottom, and I've been using it for a while now. And the yin yang speaks to the circle. The circle represents completeness, it represents life, it represents cycles. And the circle is made up of two complementary and or mirrored twins. There's the dark and the light. And neither of them is bigger than the other. And the relationship between the two is a nice S curve, a shape between the two, the interface. And there's also the recognition here that there's dark in the light and light in the dark. And I think it's that sort of experience that we're looking here in a world filled with conflict out there and often opposing ideas in our own mind, that can we actually come to rest so that there's this harmonic balance, the sense of peace between the two sides. We certainly don't need any more war. And so the silence, I want to say something about what silence is and what it isn't. Silence for me is not a complete absence. It's not nothing. It's not non-existent. It's not the absence of any sound. But silence represents a quietness. It represents a sense of stillness. There still may be noise or awareness of things going on, but somehow the volume's turned down. And so silence is more for me about a quality than an absolute absence of any sound. The relevance of this is that in terms of finding silence and rest within ourselves, we are certainly aware that we all have this chatter going on in our mind all the time. The inner voice, the commentary, the judgments, the mind is off in the past or the future. And silence is that space sort of out of which those thoughts and feelings can actually arise. So if we can just drop below the noise and the chatter of the mind. And the first part of this evening, we're going to actually practice that. And then the rest of the presentation and the slides is really just commentary on what we've experienced. So I usually start with my drop-in. I call it a drop-in. And if you wish, just closing your eyes. If you want to keep your eyes open, by all means, just allow your gaze to settle on something 6 or 9 inches in front of you, and just allow the gaze to settle. And you can blink as you feel free. And as always, in every moment, we just set an intention. And mindfulness is about presence, and it's about showing up for what this moment is, what this moment can be. And with that intention comes permission. And the permission to drop in below the thoughts, the usual chatter. Now, the chatter wants to carry us off, so I use anchors. For those of you who have your own anchors and are already experienced, you can feel free to just tune me out and drop in, trusting that you'll pick up on the commentary when the time is right. But I'll offer 2 anchors, and the first is the body. And we want to allow the body to rest as it is right now. And we do that in a very simple way, just by allowing the body to come into our awareness more fully. We shift our attention to just the body as a whole, whether you're lying or sitting. Just noticing Are you holding any tension anywhere? And if you are, just perhaps on the next breath, just noticing that as you breathe in and breathe out, maybe that bit of tension settles. Excuse me. This isn't anything formal, nothing fancy. It's just settling into the body, which is always here. We're not looking to fix anything. We're not looking to get anywhere. Just allowing that capacity of attention and awareness to hold whatever the body feels like right now. And staying with the experience of just knowing how your body is in this moment. And if there's an ache or a pain or a twist, you're a little uncomfortable, adjust it yourself. Remember, this is all about permission. There's something about tonight's talk that brought you here. There's something inside of you that gave you permission to be doing this rather than doing something else. And as we carry on, remembering that in the words of T.S. Eliot, speech beyond words reach into the silence. Speech after words reach into the silence. Words after speech reach into the silence. And we can notice another layer of experience here because the body doesn't have words. The body is, we feel it, we sense it. Whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And as we're resting into the body, we're staying as best as we can with the experience, shifting your attention to the breath. Now the mind will have some commentary or questions or judgments or am I doing this right or doubts or whatever. And for now, with intention and permission, you're giving the mind the opportunity to rest. You're giving the mind permission to not have to keep going 24/7. You're letting the mind idle. You're putting it into neutral. There may still be a little hum, but you're letting the revs just sort of calm down a little bit. The way that we do that is by just shifting the attention to the breath. Just letting the breath lead you. And if you notice you're trying to correct it or lengthen it or count it in any way, just let that go. The breath has its own natural, gentle, quiet rhythm. And just staying with the experience of the breath. you'll notice that there's a moment of stillness, even though it's fleeting. There's a moment of stillness at the end of the out-breath. There's a moment of stillness at the end of the in-breath. So we drop in below the noise, the cacophony, the disharmony of all that thinking. We give ourselves permission to rest with intention. The mind will go off, and if it does, you just say, no, thank you. Thank you for thinking, but right now, I'd like to give you some time off. You may actually notice the mind thanking you for that. As you drop in, there may be an image, there may be a sensation or a feeling that there's something quieter here. Where there's perhaps less tension. And silence isn't empty. It's actually full of answers. It's a space for curiosity and rest. It has a certain gentility to it. Curiosity. And you'll notice the mind is still there. It's sort of, the thoughts are going across, and perhaps you have a sense that the speed of your thoughts is a little slower. The volume's turned down a little bit. Perhaps there's even a little gap between the thoughts. They may not be so frequent. As you notice, we don't need to wrestle the thoughts. It's a very, very gentle practice to enable the sense of stillness and quiet to not even emerge, it's already there. You're not making anything happen. You're just settling in. You're resting into something beyond thinking, underneath thinking, beneath. Some people think of it as the silence underneath the storms of the wave on the ocean. Some people experience it as the big sky behind the rain clouds. Some people experience it as a vast openness. Some people experience it as an earthy stillness that you might experience in a forest. Whatever comes up for you, that's your quiet space. It takes practice. It's always here. We don't make silence by making silence. We make silence by turning down the noise. And the noise is the mind, the thinking mind, emotions and feelings, opinions. If we turn down the volume, the silence is there. It's a little more quiet, a little more still. Language is important. Resting. There's an active verb here. We're resting in this experience. In the stillness of the silence, if we listen, we can hear the whispers of the heart. In the stillness of the silence, if we listen, we can hear the whispers of the heart. When we think of the words heart and spirit and soul, they have a certain flavor and tone to them. They tend to be softer and gentler, experiential. I call this the stuff below the neck, below the level of the brain. So my words after the speech reach into the silence. The words point at this experience. And it's in this space that we begin to see the harmonic between the yin and the yang, the dark and the light, the yes and the no, the confusion and the clarity, the joy and the pain, the despondency and the hope. They're actually mirrors of each other. The light defines the dark, and the dark makes us appreciate the light. It doesn't need to be war or tension. So the invitation is always to be resting and finding that harmonic between these aspects, these pairs of opposites, these polarities or tensions. And the yin-yang symbol captures that beautifully, because that's how it is. Because in a way, we can't get rid of the yucky stuff, as I call it. It's going to come. And nor does the yummy stuff last forever either. And so the invitation is to bring a harmonizing quality when one tends to dominate and the other tends to hide away. And of course, at this time of the year, it's no accident that we have the Festival of Lights in so many traditions. At the moment, we're on night 5 of Hanukkah, the Jewish Festival of Lights. The zoo lights are on. We have the Christmas season. Houses and trees are decorated. And it's no accident we do that in the darkest month of the year. In fact, it's so obvious because we want to bring some harmonic and balancing and resting in those dualities. Then the invitation is to be able to recognize these pairs of opposites as we move in the world out there. To travel or not to travel. To wear masks or not wear masks. Where and when. And if we can navigate these tougher decisions with the same kind of rest and stillness, it adds something to the quality of our life, the quality of our being. And then there's greater inner harmony, which brings a greater capacity for inner harmony and outer harmony as we go through our days and we do what we need to do. So taking 3 deeper breaths at your own pace and following the breath all the way in and all the way out. And if your eyes have been closed, allowing them to open, perhaps noticing that somehow they'll open when they are ready. To the degree possible, as you bring yourself back to the room you're in, and the screen and the slides, to hold in some way a memory, a felt sense of what this can be like, and something we can move towards. This is an acronym. Some of you know this is what we did. All the rest of the slides are commentary on everything we've just experienced in the last 20 minutes. RAIN is a good acronym. We recognize what's going on. And the first order of business is not to fight it. We're talking about harmony. So we allow things to be and we accept it as it is. And acceptance does not mean you need to like it or suck it up. Acceptance does not mean you don't wish it were different. Acceptance does not mean you don't do anything. Acceptance is not positive psychology or making everything happy and perfect. It's just not resisting something so that we can investigate it, the I in RAIN. As we investigate it, we come closer to it and we're more likely to establish a relationship which is more in flow. And then we see what's naturally arising and we can nurture different things. The first step is to recognize and allow. The graphic at the bottom, we're called human beings. We're not called human doings. We're very good at doing. We all have lists and jobs. And the yin yang speaks to a certain dynamic, a certain flow, being in the groove. And mindfulness is really at its heart, one way of thinking about it is it's about improving how I'm being with whatever is coming up. It's It's about my relationship to myself and the world out there. So that's how I'm being while I'm doing my doing. And there's a harmonic. And when those two are in a greater balance, we call that flow. There's a greater sense of ease. There's a sense of peace. The two sides are not battling each other. Mindfulness has got two components, process and content. And they're very intimately related, just like the yin and the yang. This is a commentary on what we've just been through, that I invited you to pay attention on purpose and permission, to ground ourselves in the body and the breath. We became aware of the chattering mind, and we have a choice of bringing ourselves back to this moment. We set that intention. There's the word there that has the yellow asterisk. And that's likelier, it's not guarantee, but it's likelier to bring us closer to a wiser mind, wiser action. We're going to get a better outcome. What we call the human curriculum. What human curriculum? It's called your life. This is nothing less than your life. And it all starts with this mindful attention, awareness, and presence. So that's a process. We actually just went through that. And so green's the lush, and what we move towards, the growth, the yes, the green light. This is mindfulness as content. What can we be mindful of? And in this context, we're talking of the content of what our experience is. So during the sit, we were aware of the mind, we were body, breath, and then aware of things inside of us that we speak beyond the words into that silence. So we can be aware of this moment that we call now, because we're always in the now. And as some of you have heard, Harvard research, close to 50% of the time, our mind is either off in the future or the past. We're not actually present. Of course, we need to relate to the future and the past, but the time that we do that is actually now. Whichever way you look at it, you're back here now, so that we can be in a relation. And in the now, the mind just pops up on the left here, all kinds of viruses and thoughts, and all kinds of thoughts which may not be telling the truth. We confuse thoughts with the truth, the T and the T. We conflate and believe our feelings to be facts. That's not always true. It doesn't matter how loud a thought is. It doesn't matter how much it yells at you. It doesn't matter how strong your feeling is. It's not always the truth. And if you notice, you just sit for a while, the thoughts and the feelings are just replaced by something else a few moments later. So we can actually rest in that coming and going of the thoughts and the feelings, even though they're very intense, because they can grab us and then they lead to actions. I'm feeling angry. Someone cut me off in traffic. I think, what do you know what? And our actions can be unhelpful. In red at the bottom, we need to do less of them, cross that out. We need to be more of what's neutral and more of what's helpful. So if we find ourselves getting carried away, this is, okay, what am I getting carried away with? Because our actions also have these strong feedback loops. The angrier I get, the angrier I feel, and the angrier I feel, the more my thoughts want to justify the feeling. And that's why we have this going back and forth. So we can hold all of this in awareness, on purpose, with attention, and choose to come back to more rest, more harmonic, more awareness that this too shall pass. We live in a society where parts of us are stolen. Right? There was a movie some years ago, The Grifters, very good movie. John Cusack was in it. And the grifts in our life today that rob us, without necessarily us having chosen them, lists, goals, chores, doings, the definable, the measurable, and this electronic leash called technology. And these things are very subtle, and we really can ask ourselves, how much of this did we actually choose? Yes, we live in a complex culture, but what can we let go of that might be stealing us and robbing us of the gifts? And the gifts, Einstein said, the intuitive mind, the intuitions, the stuff below the neck. Intuition is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a servant. We've created a society that honors the servant and forgotten the gift. So we're very much wrapped up in the yellow circle, the doings, and we often are pulled in so many directions, either internally or externally, that we feel disconnected and fractured from ourselves. In other words, we're not in this beautiful dance, this harmonic. So silence is the space where we can drop in beneath that and we can get into the silent mode. Now, silent mode, I like this graphic because the phone can still be vibrating, but it's not pinging all the time. And we don't need to go there, and we can spend more time in this green zone where we can really drop into this inner space, these greater intuitive gifts inside of us, and less time in this red zone. The last 21 months have really felt like this. These are the four horsemen of the apocalypse: death, famine, conquest, and war. And not only is there external stuff going on right now, but there's also internal stuff. We're constantly arguing with ourselves. We're constantly beating ourselves up or negating our own experiences or judging our thoughts or feeling badly for being angry. It just goes on and on and on and on. So this also represents an internal state that we're often at war with ourselves. When we're at war with ourselves, nobody wins. I can't be winning. When I saw this painting, it was interesting because the break in the clouds there's light, there's a rainbow, there's a lamb which is gentle, and the lamb is bleeding and hurt a little bit, and there's a halo and there's a book here. And that book may represent a religious scripture of some kind. In this painting, it may well do, but it also represents wisdom and learning and history. That on the other side of the clouds, there's certainly something much more gentle. In Mandarin, the word crisis represents two aspects to it. The one is danger, which is what we tend to focus on when there's a lot of unknown or when there's war or crisis. And we get into this alarm mode, and this alarm mode is very loud, and we're watching and we're vigilant and we're exhausted and we're stressed. It's the opposite of what we need to bring into balancing and resting. And to recognize that in crisis, there's also opportunity. And so the ideal situation looks and feels a bit like this. It's a beautiful picture. And some weeks ago, I drew my own version of this, and this is my reality. This is what mine feels like a lot of the time, right? I try to bring some wonderful colors. The bits are sort of there. There's a hint of it, and it's a mishmash. And it's very rare that we get to this sort of state, but we move towards having a sense that there is some relationship here between all these pieces. There are inflections, and there's depth, and there's nuance, and there's relationality, and there's no straight lines anywhere. There's a curve, and things are butt against each other, and they live together. The word flow has come up, and gentle flowing rivers, and the word flow when there seems to be a harmonic or music. And this is inner and outer well-being. And these are the 5 Bs. So which bits of my orchestra am I not necessarily playing? What have I neglected? What in my heart or my spirit or my being have I neglected? Because that's where we start, is my sense of being a human being. And the question is, what am I? What are these instruments in my orchestra? And I've got some slides on that coming up. What are my beliefs? How do I want to be in the world? What's important to me? What are my values? More lists, more things to do, or perhaps thinking about how these two flow together. And then where do I belong? Who is my tribe? And we belong to many different tribes. We professionally, socially, spiritually, sports, hobbies, all kinds of things, community organizations, volunteering, whatever. Where do I belong? And am I showing up in the way that I want to be in the world? Am I showing up with the fullness of my being? How am I showing up, in the words of Brene Brown? How do you want to show up and give back to the world, to connect and to be in flow? And then becoming, this is constantly changing. We're always in flow because every moment changes, and feelings come and feelings go, and thoughts come and thoughts go, and viral variants come and go, and yeah. So this is a constant flow back and forth. And it starts with really a deeper understanding of what it means to be human and how do you want to be in the world. There's the intention, there's the wiser mind and the wiser heart. Where do I belong? How do I want to show up? And the being. Here's a slide. I talk about the Orchestra of Wellbeing. Most of us are familiar with, at the bottom here of the brain, and the details aren't important, and that's the reason the graphic is small. This is biology, fight or flight or freeze, the reptile brain. I want to, if I'm on edge, if there's any threat, I get worked up. It's the opposite of rest and silence. It gets noisy because all that adrenaline here goes up to the middle of the brain where my emotions, and now I'm vigilant and I'm watching and I'm afraid and I'm fearful and I'm catastrophizing. And then my thinking kicks in because the thinking, the job of the mind is to respond to these body sensations. Body awarenesses come first, and then the thinking and analysis comes afterwards. But when we're hyper aroused, freaking out, our thinking goes offline. We don't do a good job. So this is the stuff that they talk a lot about in terms of social emotional learning for kids. The fullness of the orchestra, there are 4 golden instruments. I'm going to try to find a gold font. What is good for me? The ethical, there's actually an ethical imperative. There's no reason why we shouldn't be looking for more goodness in ourselves and to then spread it. And silence and harmony and rest is good. No one can ever deny that, and the world would be beneficial, right? Or the benefactor of that. Relationships, I put this in because to remind me of relationship with self. Very, very critical of ourselves. Very harsh, we're very judgmental. We haven't done that job good enough, and we keep on just adding and adding and adding and wonder why we burn out. And so improving the quality of myself with goodness and my social relationships. We can pay attention to, and I use this term during the sit, spirit, the human spirit. I use the term heart, spirit, and energy interchangeably. We know when our heart is heavy, we know when our heart is joy. We know when our heart is empty. We know when our heart is tired. There's literally a heaviness right in the middle here. We can choose and set an intention if things are going too far the one way. We can set an intention to come back to what the heart knows. We can choose to set an intention. Because of darkness, I choose to light candles. Because of pain and suffering, I choose to find joy when the moment is right. And soul, I use it in the way that the psychologist Carl Jung does, the true, genuine, authentic self. the journey that each of us has in our life. What is our calling? What is my belonging? How am I showing up in the world? How do I want to give? What's important to me? What gets me out of bed in the morning? And when all of this stuff is out of whack at the bottom here, these bottom three instruments, these four can help us come back and restore some balance and bring us back into a flow. This is really, really important. Really, really important. So inner harmony is, how do I want to be in the world? And here are doings. So let's make this practical, Allan. Thanks, that's very nice. Leslie mentioned earlier on, I've got two acronyms I've come up with, and my cursors are playing with me. The first order of business is I need to slow down, be patient and kind. We did that in the sitting, SPK. And it takes just 3-4 minutes to just give ourselves permission with intention to settle in and drop in. Now, the mind will be going off because the mind's got its stories, but it's a one-trick pony. And we just say, no, thank you. Right now, I'm setting an intention to slow down. I'll automatically be more patient and kind. Once I do that, if I'm lost, I look for PBJ, peace, beauty, and joy, as guiding lights. I don't always find them easily, and they don't always last for long, but at least I reorient. How do I know when to look for peace? When I'm at war with myself or with the world out there. I'm arguing with myself about stuff I have no control over. Oh, okay, Allan, good luck, because I can't win a war with myself. When I'm feeling ugly, I look for beauty. What does ugliness look like for me? And each of you, of course, will have your own experience of your own ugliness. For me, ugliness is when I find that I'm judgmental and critical and irritable, and I know better, and my ego's getting in the way, and it doesn't have a good feel about it. The mind wants to justify it, but it doesn't feel good. That's the other instruments in my orchestra reminding me that it doesn't feel good. How do I know when I need to look for joy? When I'm feeling the D words, depressed, despondent, despairing. Now, I don't need to look for the war, the ugliness, and the despondency. They show up in spades. They show up in spades. And this week has been particularly challenging for me. One of our neighbor's sons died of a heart attack suddenly last Friday night, middle of the night, 27 years old. And they live just a few houses away from us. And the deceased's older brother is one of the best friends of my son. So it's been a hell of a week. And so to be able to navigate that kind of darkness and tragedy and pain and suffering. And this afternoon I went over again to the parents and we chatted, and I had a few people over, and we had moments of storytelling and we had moments of laughter to bring the balance when the moment is right. Yes, we have to acknowledge. Yes, we have to grieve. Yes, we have to pour the soil over the coffin. But in the midst of all of that, we mustn't allow the darkness to carry on forever. Will this family have forever darkness? Absolutely. And yet we can come back to this sense of a harmonic in the big picture. Harmony is balancing. We're a verb. These two arrows, and I read a book a while back called Two Arrows Meeting in Midair. Meeting in midair. They're not trying to kill each other or conquer each other. Although they're coming from opposite directions and they're clashing, they actually turn green as they meet and they kiss. And our being, we're looking for wholeness. And it's interesting that these other words are related to the word wholeness. Healing, health, holy holiday and wholeness. We look for the restoring of the fullness, all the instruments in the orchestra, so that we harmonize some flow. And how do we do that? Well, we need a lot more care. It shouldn't have a Y at the end here, by the way. Caritas is the Latin word charity. And cardiac is heart, care, core. So it's interesting. We look at these words and we just immediately see the connection between heart and core and caring and charity. And we feel that as a gentility within ourselves, a resting, a silent place in which they exist. And our only job is to just keep getting in touch with it so that we can feel more whole and healthy and heal as a process. We're always continually coming to wholeness because we're always being fractured and disconnected. So that's the work, to keep coming back. That's the iteration. Carl Jung, as far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of your being. I spoke about that earlier. We can't get rid of darkness. When darkness shows up, we just need to know what to do and how to be with it and know it and feel it and sense it. For many of us, we have an inner wasteland. Many people have missed out on things when they were growing up from their families of origin. In worst cases, abuse or trauma. We may have denied ourselves stuff along the way. We may believe we're not worthy enough of doing stuff for ourselves now. And we live our lives without having done any of that stuff. And in the end, we can have regrets. So as a therapist, I came to appreciate this, not only for myself, but also for many people I worked with, that just because stuff happened to you, you know what? You can love yourself in ways you may not have been loved, with your heart and the silence and harmonics. You can give back to yourself now, because why not? You don't need to wait. There's an inherentness that's already there that we all have. Do things for yourself. That's not selfishness. We believe that we have to burn out, and martyrdom has become a virtue in our culture. I'm so burnt out, I'm working 90-hour weeks. Now, for some people, that might be a financial necessity. Of course, I'm not saying there aren't people who have to do that and are really, really suffering. For many people on this call, you can still give yourself more than you may be giving yourself right now, so that in the end you have as few regrets as possible and you turn your wasteland into a garden. Your life, how are we being and doing? So what areas of my life? This is in an alphabetical order. Slides will be available later on, and if any of you know how to do screen shots, that's another option. Some of us are still working in academic settings or pursuing studies in our lives. Great. Wonderful. That's part of your music. Some of us need to look at our behaviors. If anxiety becomes an issue, can we work with anxiety so we're not avoiding so much? Or if we're very angry and snappy, we need to work on that piece. We need to look at our thought patterns. Are we doing too much futuring, catastrophizing? And there's plenty to catastrophize out there. And it will carry us off into the future so that we're not actually finding that rest and flow in the moment. We may be in phases of our lives that developmentally, we're just graduating from a program, we're starting a new job, we in a new relationship, we're becoming parents or grandparents. So how are we going to navigate and be in the flow with these changes? Our emotions. Can we practice perhaps not confusing a feeling with a fact and a thought with a truth? They're not the same. Family, F, what our relationships with our family is like. Some relationships are still worthy of redemption, some are worthy of letting go of. You can't force things, but remember there's no forcing between those two pieces of the yin yang. Leisure, for fun's sake.
Just have some fun. Whatever happened to fun? Here's P, we need to be paying attention to the physical stuff in our lives. Sleep, exercise, food, nutrition, etc. Screens, we need to be careful of our media diet. And are we doom scrolling all the time? Because if it bleeds, it leads in the media. If it bleeds, it leads. Catchy headlines, clickbait. We need to limit some of this stuff because a lot of it's not actually fact. It's just clickbait. Another is self-reflection. Can we come back to looking at what are our assets? How have I gone through my lives before? Who's been there for me? Who's my tribe? What inner and outer assets have I got I can tap into right now? Social, there's been a lot of grief and loss through people have died in the last year and a half. There's tragedies, and we've also lost a lot of social connections in some ways. We need to understand the process of grief and not pathologize it. When we're feeling disconnected, how can we connect again? We need to feed our spirit and our soul, things that make us, that bring joy and beauty to our lives. That we are the only species that we know that really can take these creative capacities to a much higher level. Art and music and dance and expressive arts and all that stuff. Vocation, our work, our job, and helping others, it sure gets us out of our head. This is Caramel in Fish Creek Park. We adopted her last year in April. She is our COVID pooch. And there was this incredible moment at about 8:30 one morning last January. It was about -15. And we were just there, and I don't know what she was looking at. And I just pulled out my cell phone and I just caught the shot. So here's this beautiful dog that I'm in relationship with. You can see the frost on her fur. The sun's coming up, and there was just this harmonic silence. It's just incredible. And these moments are there all the time. It's easy to miss them. Just easy to miss them. There are a number of books on silence. I just have a couple of slides left. There are a number of books on silence. This one I read many years ago, The Mystery of Wholeness. And this is, and they each have a different slant. This one speaks to going inwards and towards God. Robert Sardello has a Christian slant on his taking still worth that silence, and he peels back the layers of going into the heart. This one is a Zen practitioner returning to silence. That's the action, returning again and again to silence. Christina Feldman was a teacher at a retreat I was at 13 years ago. She lives in the UK, and she wrote a book on silence. This is a more secular book on the power of silence, because silence can mean so many different things. Silence can be powerful in terms of creating a space for self-reflection and growth. People who are disadvantaged can be silenced by power differentials. Silence can be used in a relationship to stonewall. So it's a really interesting read as well. So there's a number of books on the value of silence, and in a culture of noise, we don't spend enough time in silence, as I've tried to articulate it. I love this poem called Love After Love. Derek Walcott won the Nobel Prize in the early 90s from the Caribbean. The time will come when with elation you will greet yourself arriving at your own door and in your own mirror. Each will smile at the other's welcome and say, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who's loved you all your life, whom you've ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit and feast on your life. I added this, I took his line and said, feast on your inner life. Those instruments are there. The dropping in, the silence, the harmonics, the resting. That's it. May leave this, no, I'll stop sharing. And we've got 25 minutes for reflections, questions.
Okay, thank you, Allan. That was a wonderful talk. I enjoyed the many mnemonics that you developed. I'm always amazed at the creativity of your mind and how you can produce many different ideas that are helpful for us as we navigate our own lives. So Maya and I both noticed that your mic may have changed at one point. So we wondered if you could check and see if it has become disconnected in any way.
Let me unplug it and plug it in again. Yeah, sorry, I didn't see that in the chat, Rob.
It sounds better now.
Yeah.
Okay,
Is
thank
that better?
you. Yes, that's great.
Yeah. I'm going to put on gallery view because, oh, right, all the, okay.
I think you'll be pinned.
Yeah, I can't do that. So yeah, there are a couple. Leslie, if I can invite you to just sorry about that.
1, 4, 1, 1, 2, 5.
Okay, so I do have a question for you from one of our participants. It says, since COVID, my daughter has had more mood swings, gets mad easily, and is angry at the world. Can you provide some tips? Also, some grounding techniques. Breathing does not work for her.
Best answer I can offer, both as a pediatrician and a child psychiatrist, is that I don't want to make any suggestions because I don't actually know what's going on. And this isn't an appropriate forum for you to share more information about your daughter. I would suggest that you, if you have a family doc or a pediatrician, that you actually have your daughter see this person as a doorway. The reason I'm saying this is not to be evasive, that to know what I need to do, I need to know what's going on. And I can think of many, many different things that could be going on here. And there's often more than one thing going on at a time. And if I think about that, I will go back to my slides. If I think about what's going on, let me come back to, where's that slide that I want to show you? In answering this question. It's this slide here. There may be many different things going on for your daughter, and I don't know, and I won't make a suggestion because I don't know if it's going to be the right one. It may be too simplistic, and it may not work. So there may be with her, there may be things around regulation and the breath work doesn't work. Maybe there's an element of anxiety, which often starts down here, and emotions, and regulating emotions and being able to tolerate emotions can be very challenging. That's a skill that your daughter may need to learn, as do many adults. What kind of pattern of thinking has your daughter got? All right, again, there's a lot of uncertainty and suffering in the world, and our minds can catastrophize. There's a lot to worry about, the future and all of that. So you can see the different layers. Some young people don't recognize, they just give into all of this, and they don't recognize or understand or appreciate or have the skills yet to try and control all of this, and they may need the skills and the practice. So in other words, what I'm saying is a very good assessment would be helpful before you decide what you're going to do. There may be things going on in her school life. There may be things going on in the academically. So I won't even make any suggestion, and I know that might be disappointing for you, but that's truly the best answer that I can give here, because I want to be useful and productive as I can. Are there regular, I'm reading another question, are there regular meditation sessions through the Breath Project that we can access? Do you have to be a member? Is there a fee for this? There's a lot of information on a website called the Breath Project, and Phil Bluestein started that website, and his website has a link to this wellness through mindfulness group. But on that website, there's a tremendous amount of information, resources, videos, readings, talks, etc. You don't need to be a member. There's no membership. Is there a fee? We do have administrative fees currently for maintenance of the website, etc. And in the days when we can get back to being live, people would make a small donation of a few dollars to pay for the Shaganappi Community Center. So there is a site, if you wish to make even a small donation, we would certainly welcome that. During the pandemic restrictions, I'm looking at the next question. I learned to find ways free myself on the things I can control. Thank you for that offering. The thinking mind is driven by this thing we call ego, the I, me, mine. And we all need to move in the world. We have a sense of who we are. I have the same birthday I've always had. I have the same name I've always had. I seem to have the same body. All of that is I, me, mine. And because we experience ourselves as the center of the universe, the world seems to spin around me. We can believe that we can control things because we want to, because we're smart, we're motivated, we work hard, etc., etc. But in reality, there's a lot we're not in control of. We're often not even in control of when we were born. We weren't in control of a lot of our neighborhood. Our parents made our choices growing up. We may be beholden to certain jobs and bosses and organizations and stuff. So there's a lot we don't control. And this is where, back to the RAIN acronym. That when we recognize that there's so much I can't control, I stop being at war with myself. I stop being at war with the world because there's so much I can't control. And the moment I accept that, I can investigate and ask myself the question, what's my relationship to the things I can't control? What's my relationship to the things I can't control? Because if we're constantly at war with it, we're never going to win and we'll just get exhausted. So thank you for that comment.
Hi, Allan. There's another comment here. Any suggestions in dealing with loneliness? This person lives with 2 male family members but lacks female company.
Hidden inside every unpleasant feeling, in this case it's loneliness, is a gift. And I talk of it as the flip side. Loneliness is asking for connection. Now, of course, there may be physical limitations. It depends on your vaccination status, your friends, have you got an immune compromise, etc., etc. So within the parameters that we can, there are ways of connecting with people online. There's a way of socially distancing. We can join groups. There's an organization called Meetup. And if you have a particular hobby or whatever, or some group. So the internet has provided people with this incredible way of connecting with people. And so loneliness invites me to reconnect right there. Hunger, not pleasant, invites me to eat. Tiredness invites me to sleep. Thirst invites me to drink. So loneliness, we lean into it, we investigate it, and I'm lonely because I'm disconnected. Great. Now you ask yourself what's called for, the person who asked this question. What's called for? Oh, I need to connect. So there are lots of groups which, the book clubs, there's all kinds of stuff. So you can identify what are your passions and your interests, the person who asked the question. Where do you belong? What kinds of things have you got? What might you be interested in? And go look on Meetup to find a group, right? Or there may be friends that you wanted to connect with and you've kind of let it go and you're feeling a little guilty that you haven't phoned them in 9 months. I know that's happened to a lot of people, myself included, right? That people have just like fallen off each other's radars, not because there's anything wrong. So pick up that phone, make that connection again. Okay. You're welcome to raise your virtual hand, anyone. I'm letting Leslie see if any of the hands are raised. Let me remind, yeah, go ahead, Leslie.
I have a question for you, Allan. I'm particularly interested in your experiences as a pediatrician. How do you think working with children all these years has influenced how you see the world, how you've approached your own spiritual growth and nurturing yourself?
Children are delightful. Those of you who are parents will understand it. It's also the most scary thing that you will ever do. Children are delightful because they have a very natural curiosity about the world. I used to not be crazy about teenagers, but when I went into psychiatry, I stopped being afraid of them and I enjoyed them because they're so real. They pick up adult nonsense and they question it because they're at that stage where they haven't become numb to the world. That's why so many revolutions and youth movements have started and all that stuff, the vitality of youth. They have a vitality and they're very honest. So children are a great opportunity to really see the world with fresh eyes. I haven't lost my inner child, if I want to call it that. That I believe that we all have the capacity to set an intention about the kind of energy we want to have in the world. Now that can be very, very hard in the depths of despair or crying at the funeral of a 27-year-old. Of course it is. But to keep that as a light, something to move towards. And kids have that capacity. Kids are not born depressed or anxious or lost or disconnected from themselves. Most of the work that I've done is to recognize, to come back to ourselves, to come back to, and if there were things that you missed out on from your school or your environment, okay, well, give that to yourself now. There's nothing stopping you. Carl Jung said, we are not what happened to us. We are who we choose to become. Now, in the darkness, it can be very difficult to feel that there is light. But what we can do is set that intention. And if we keep setting that intention, and we recognize that this too shall pass, that we can keep moving in that way. And the reason I started off here, I think about everything, and I'm on your question still here, Leslie. This is not to deny the difficulties. This is not to deny the darkness in any way. This is not to pretend or to whitewash or deny or minimize the pain, the suffering, the loss, the four horsemen of the apocalypse. It's all there. And yet, can we orient ourselves back to this intuition, this deeper kinds of knowing? Come back to playing all the instruments in our orchestra. And I'll put the slide up because often we can ask ourselves, am I doing stuff that's good for me? Am I filling my own cup? Because an empty cup can't quench any thirst. Am I putting on my own oxygen mask first and then assisting the passenger next to me? Can I develop a deeper, healthier, softer, gentler relationship with myself? This is hard work. A lot of people have said to me, kids, oh, Donsky, this is easier said than done. I say this is hard work. But what's the alternative? Staying in the dark?
I do have another question. Sorry, Allan.
Yeah, go ahead. No, that's fine.
There is another question here. Which relates to what you're talking about. Can you speak again about the permission we give ourselves to manage childhood trauma?
Almost the deepest of the work that needs to be happening. There's a ton of research recently, especially in the last decade, that many of the disorders that we see in the traditional diagnostic categories, including addictions, eating disorders, personality issues, anxiety, depression, you name it, that behind it is a lot of trauma. The thing about trauma is that if it happens early and it's deep enough and or frequent enough, it changes our view of ourselves in the world, so that you can end up growing up with a belief system that because this happened, because yucky stuff happened to me, I must be yucky, because I feel yucky all the time and I was treated in yucky ways. Therefore, if I'm yucky, I'm not worthy. And if I'm not worthy, I don't deserve. And if I don't deserve, how can I have permission to change? So trauma really goes to the essence of our being. And so one of the first steps to change is to understand what trauma is all about. You can't meditate yourself out of trauma. In fact, it can make it worse, because to get in touch with the body and the heart without some sense of structure or feeling strong enough within yourself, it can actually be re-traumatizing. But it always has to start with that permission. And people who've been traumatized don't believe that they're lovable, safe, or worthy. If you don't believe you're worthy, lovable, or safe, you don't have permission to do anything. You're not even at the starting gate. So the trauma work, and a lot of the trauma stuff is in the body. It's locked in. It's pre-verbal, and that's why you can't talk yourself out of trauma. The brain will say, I know I should be giving myself permission. I know I shouldn't be reacting. I know I'm safe. But all of that is here. It's not below the neck. And this is where all that trauma is experienced again and again. So that's why there's trauma therapies out there, trauma-informed practices that actually turn all that stuff around. I hope that's a bit of a help. If you can give yourself the permission and you're at that point, well, great, go ahead. Trauma, again, can be very variable. It has different impacts. Not everyone who's had traumatic events will have post-traumatic stress disorder. And often trauma is more about the way your heart, your body responds to what happened. Because there are many people who can go through the same thing, and some seem to bounce back, and other people seem to have stalled because of it. So if you can, by all means, give yourself the permission. But if you find it hard to give yourself the permission, you may need to see a professional to help you through this. I'm looking at the follow-up question. How does the body hold and process our psychological suffering? How do we do it? When do we do it? Is it a formal practice? Oh, wow. How does the body hold and process our psychological suffering? So psychological suffering, I want to come back. Yeah, these two. Let me go back to the relevant slide here. So psychological suffering, we can be tormented psychologically by our feelings. I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling down, I'm feeling depressed. The thoughts can also be suffering. I hate myself, I judge myself, I hate the world, if this person that, if only my kids this, if only my parents had that, if only my neighbor this, my teacher that. It just goes on and on and on. So broadly speaking, I would put psychological suffering as here, the thoughts and the feeling stuff. And of course, those woundedness, back from the previous question about trauma, that trauma stuff really happens in the lower brain here, the biology. We get on alert, the arousal, the tension, the chronic stress. And then the thoughts and the feelings are always on guard, and we're vigilant. And so the thoughts and the feelings and the suffering and the body sensations, the biology, they're not separate. All these are related. They're not separate. So trauma, for example, would work and interfere here, that if I don't feel safe, loved, and worthy, well, then I'm not good enough. Well, if I'm not good enough, well, what do you mean have a good relationship with myself? There's nothing there to have a good relationship with. And if I don't feel good enough about myself and I don't feel worthy enough in myself, I'm certainly not worthy enough of having a decent, healthy relationship out there socially. Right? And we can begin to feel how the energy and the heart is drained by this trauma, and the body's just exhausted, and we can feel an emptiness in the soul. We can feel an emptiness in the soul because the true, genuine, authentic self wasn't valued and allowed silence and space and respected and seen as being beautiful. So people who've been traumatized, they often haven't had much of this. There wasn't room for creativity. They were always afraid. They can't let go because they're always vigilant. They can't accept things because it hurts. Hard to forgive stuff. How do I be with my suffering? I'm just suffering all the time. I don't know what compassion even means. I wasn't given or shown or held in the gentility of compassion. I was always judged and criticized. How can I do this? So trauma really, really runs deeply and stops us from not only these practices, but you can't slow down. How can you find beauty, peace, and joy if you feel yucky? You just can't. And these things weren't in your life if you were traumatized, right? You felt disconnected from those people who were hurting you, and it wasn't authentic. It felt like they were lies, and I'm not patient, and people weren't humble and apologizing or any of this. So that whole trauma stuff, the cascade just piles up here. And that's why, in spite of the trauma, why we come back and why I put this slide in. Because this is the therapeutic journey. This is the healing journey. This is the movement towards wholeness. And when we move towards that wholeness, we come closer to finding that peace and finding that instead of the wasteland, there perhaps is an inner feast. I may not have been given it, but I can feast. I can listen to my own inner music, my own harmony. And this is the work. of coming to, keeping an eye on the time, resting in the moment and finding a way to some sense of harmonic. And the only way we can do that is by getting a little quieter, which can be hard if you're always in arousal mode. It's 8:28. The timing is good. I'm happy to stay on a minute or two if there are other questions. The recording will stop at 8:29, 8:30. I'm not seeing any signals from Leslie that any raised hands. I believe we've answered everything in the session. So yeah, thanks, Leslie.
Yes, I just wanted to take a moment to thank you, Allan, for your lovely presentation, and to thank Maya and the Calgary Public Library for continuing to work together with Wellness Through Mindfulness. And I also wanted to just say a little bit more about the donations. I know Allan already covered it, but we did find that our bank account was running low, to be straightforward, and that in order to continue to provide you with these presentations, because of the social media aspects, the website costs, and the technical backup that we need to do that, we do need to ask for donations if you're interested in supporting us. And you can do that on our website with a donation button. And I wanted to remind you that we do have a talk on December 16th, and we look forward to seeing you then. And thank you very much for being here with us. And I think we'll bring the recording to a close. And then if anybody has anything else they want to ask us, Allan has offered to stay for a couple of minutes here.